Welcome to Screen Chat, live from the Media Hub on RiotRadio.ca. I'm your host, Justin, and no, you're not seeing double or a mistake. We are back on the Kent farm with another episode of Screen Chat, the Smallville take. Now, as you guys know, Screen Chat is your show all about the latest Marvel movies, DC Comics, Star Wars adaptations, and much, much more. And today we're back. We're back on the farm. We're back. So, why are we back? Now, I was not going to do an episode today. I just didn't have anything planned. And yesterday was the 24. Wow, we're getting up there. The 24-year anniversary of Smallville. And as you guys know, that is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's like I think I've done quite a bit of content and coverage on Smallville, especially this time last year, as I did a whole 23-year anniversary episode. And that's kind of why I wasn't going to do one today. In the context of like anything that I would want to say about Smallville, I did already say. But while we're on the topic, yes, 24 years ago yesterday, Smallville turned 24. And just thinking back to the original season 1, seeing Clark and Lex and Lana and Chloe and Pete for the first time. And then we eventually got a chance to see the new renditions of the Kent parents with Jonathan and Martha there. We see Erica Durance at the back, who was this, I guess, universe's Lois Lane. And it was really cool to see characters that we knew from the past and got different renditions of, and you've heard that all before from me. Now, one character in particular always really stuck out to me when it came to Smallville, not for any other reason than intriguement. There was also a bit of originality there, really nice quotes, the daunting, I guess, like frame, and just the overall like negative but cool aura. And that was of Lionel Luthor, played by John Glover. Now, Lionel Luthor is a very interesting character once you get to know him. On face value, he's just the father of Lex Luthor. He, at this moment in time in season 1, runs Luthor Corp because it's not Lex Corp yet. And yeah, John Glover is playing him. So giving a little bit of a blast from the past, John Glover, if you don't know him by face and you love DC, you definitely recognize him by voice, as he actually did play the Riddler in the Batman animated series. So that was probably a lot of our first, I guess, like interpretation of John Glover in the DC universe, especially like I'm a 2002, so I'm a little bit after this show. However, this show still gets played on like Cartoon Network today. So chances are you know his voice. And like I mentioned, he would later go on to play Lionel Luthor in Smallville. Now, this is the character we're going to focus on today. Now, Lionel Luthor, like I said, on face value, he might not be someone that you would be intrigued to get to know or intrigued to see because he's a corporate villain. And I put villain in quotes because he's just a businessman. If we're being honest, a lot of those guys are evil to begin with. And he takes on the task to play Lex Luthor's father in Smallville. Now, today we're going to pretty much go over just like what he did for the plot, the dynamics he had with Lex, different quotes, just get all into the nitty-gritty stuff, and just mainly what I remember and what I took away from him. So starting off with his dynamic with his son Lex Luthor. Wow, this was so like just goosebumps thinking about it. When these guys first came onto the scene in the show, they had the definition of like a father-son rivalry. You always had Lex trying to one-up his father, win his approval, and it just never happened. Even whether it was in the corporate world, in business meetings, and behind under-the-table deals, even in fencing, Lionel always had Lex's number. And this was something that was a common theme in the early seasons of Smallville. I would say for me, I'm not going to sit here in front and say I didn't like seeing Lex lose to his dad, because it's not that I like seeing Lex lose. I just like seeing Lionel win. And he's just a character that was so like intriguing to see, like as a DC fan, to always see like Superman up here, Lex Luthor just a little bit down here, but he, still neck and neck with Superman. But then to see Smallville, and it was like Lionel's like up here and Lex was like down here at the start. This guy, whether it was, again, like I said, like business deals, couldn't beat him in like corporate sales, meetings, all that good stuff. So I really enjoyed John Glover's like hard love adaptation of Lionel Luthor. And another thing that I do need to highlight, because if you've seen the show, if you've seen Smallville, you know that this is very, very important, which is all of his quotes, man. Like, Lionel Luthor has some of the hardest lines I think I've ever seen in fiction. And just while we'll keep this image up for a bit because I do have a decent amount to go over, I just love this scene as well. He pulls up. He probably has some next like history lesson about the sword during that. But one of my favorite quotes that he has is he says, "Greatness is reified air. One must be taught to breathe." And it's so cool because this guy is somebody that I don't know how he does it. Like the one-liners in this show from him, just insane. Another thing that I really enjoy that he says to Lex Luthor, and he's said the latter of this a lot, but the first time you hear him say, "A man can't deny his true nature, can he, Lex? No, we're Luthors." And it's like, dude, no matter how hard Lex tries to be a good guy, John Glover's Lionel Luthor just constantly reminds him that, dude, we're Luthors. Like, that's never going to happen. And another cool thing that I really enjoyed was his delivery on history. This guy will always remind Lex Luthor of some like prehistoric battle or like some like medieval times like reign of terror. And it's always so like, I guess for lack of better words, random. It's always like when you least expect it, because they'll be having an argument and then he'll say something along the lines of, when Alexander the Great was dying, his generals asked him who he would leave to leave his armies. I can't take this seriously because, again, what do you do in this situation if your dad says that? And his answer was, "I'll leave it to the strongest." It's like, that was just so powerful because, again, they're just having an argument and then out of nowhere he just brings that one out, just pulls that one out and reaffirms to Lex that, like, son, you're supposed to take me over. I will, when I'm gone, I will leave it to the strongest, and that better be you. But right now it's not, is essentially their early, I guess, relationship adaptation. So yeah, whenever he was quoting Alexander the Great, I always like tapped in and locked in, because realistically, like as a kid as well watching that, if your own father isn't saying that to you and you're hearing that from Lionel Luthor, it's like, you just gotta laugh because, like, dude, this guy's getting lectured. A lot of today's themes will be me just geeking out as a fan. I'm just gonna just keep that a buck. I really like deep diving certain pieces of media, but for Lionel Luthor and Smallville specifically, it's hard not to geek out. Like it's hard to be very objective. I think he is one of the best DC villain slash, like, I guess it's kind of hard because I don't really think he's a villain. He's kind of just there, but like is the daunting cloud over Smallville. That's the best way I could describe Lionel Luthor. So moving on to more of the plot. Now this is where we could kind of, jar for a bit. So we're going to be discussing a lot of stuff that he was involved with, but just leaving this up for a bit. This right here is Lionel Luthor to me. Like when I think of Lionel Luthor, I think of this photo at the press conference. This is also in the opening, just the opening credits of Smallville while Save Me is playing. Now, first of all, let's just go through some plot impacts that he had. So I've already covered it, but like I said, he was just that cloud over Lex's head. And no matter what happened, he was always there to one-up his son. And again, it was really cool. I highly suggest you watch some of these scenes. It wasn't necessarily cool for Lex because as we see him you could just see it in the corner here, like his dad is praising, and it's like, dude, this guy can't escape it. Like his dad's greatness was just impeccable. Okay, it just was. Now another thing that this is where we kind of get to the part where he's a villain. He is heavily exploring and exploiting the meteor rocks. Now, these meteor rocks would be later dubbed as kryptonite, which we know. However, through the early seasons of Smallville, they're just called meteor rocks. Whether he's doing experiments on people, on animals, in lab, in nature, it's very sadistic what he's doing with these meteor rocks and how he's handling like real life with it, for lack of better words. He also is like heavily involved with the Smallville caves, and in these caves are like these ancient paintings about, like, maybe an ancient civilization or maybe aliens, who knows. And he thinks that those are connected to the meteor rocks, and well, we know that they are. We know that Clark himself at this point is also studying the rocks, or the caves, sorry. And it's like a cool dynamic because for Lionel, he can't escape the Kents. It's like it all comes back to them. They got lore, which we'll dive into in a bit, but it all really comes back to them. And what's really cool is that in this kind of arc, it's like, well, if Clark discovered the caves and he's here, how do we isolate him? Like, that's not really fair. So despite numerous efforts, like Clark is always right there with Lex and Lionel in the caves. And yeah, that was just like a really big part. And this kind of goes on to like the next big part that we discover in Smallville is that Lionel has been spying on Clark throughout like the first 2 seasons, has a full-on FBI file. There's a really interesting scene where I guess Lionel's safe gets opened, and then from there, Martha Kent is able to see a ton of like kryptonite, like refined kryptonite, and also has a whole FBI file on Clark. So that was also really interesting. And then another thing that we do find out in season 3, I believe it is the connection between Morgan Edge. So if you're a fan of DC, I really hope you hate Morgan Edge the way I hate Morgan Edge. I just despise this guy, bro, especially in Smallville. Oh my God, I hate Morgan Edge. He's like the #1 op. He like abuses Clark when Clark is just going by Cal. He like abuses Clark off red kryptonite. He like has it out with Lex. And it turns out that Morgan Edge and Lionel Luthor, believe it or not, were childhood best friends, bro. Like, come on. And this leads to both Morgan Edge and Lionel Luthor killing Lionel's parents so he could inherit millions and Luthor Corp itself. Like, dude, like, if that doesn't sum up who Lionel is as a person, I don't know what it is, man. This guy will literally take out his own dukes, his own parents, to get up to the top. And hey, I'm not saying I agree with that at all. But for Lionel, I guess it worked out until it didn't, which we'll get to that soon. But before we get on to that, though, to why it didn't work out, before we actually get to his repercussions of doing that, him and Lex have a really cool, I guess, moment where it is, long story short, revealed that the reason why Lionel has been so resentful of Lex his whole life is because it was reason to believe that Lex Luthor by accident killed his infant brother. And from that day forward, like, you know, Lionel just had resentment. Then through some next science stuff, he's able to get his memory back. Lex is able to get his memory back. And in doing that, he actually reveals to Lionel that it was actually his mother who killed his baby brother, Julian. And it was, oh man, just thinking about that scene. Like, I was on a podcast this morning, Cinematic Maniac, talking about This Is Us. I was getting emotional there. I just get emotional thinking about this scene because he tells him that, and then Lionel just was like, oh no, and he's like crying. He goes, Lex, if I known, and then Lex just goes, if you had known, then maybe you would have actually loved me. And it was just so good. Like that delivery from Rosenbaum to Glover there, so impactful. So he eventually forgives Lex, but not before he pays and repents for his own sins, as well he ends up in prison in an episode where Chloe Sullivan is able to, I guess, I don't know what the power was, but anything that she asked, you were able to answer honestly. And he confesses to killing his parents, and he's done up. Now, I only laugh because Chloe and Lionel had such an interesting dynamic. Lionel really wanted Chloe to spy on Clark, and Chloe was doing it. Chloe was up for a little bit, and while Lionel's in, well, I guess before he goes to prison, they end their agreement. And so Lionel gets Chloe's dad fired from Luthor Corp. Chloe gets like blacklisted from all the top colleges and universities, and she had to fight back. So she, I guess, yeah, with her like powers for an episode, got that out of him. So I just think it's really funny and ironic that the Lionel Luthor was stopped by Chloe Sullivan, and it was just really funny to me. But this part is not really that funny. Is we then see in prison, and by the way, again, this is just like a really loose review. You should really watch the show. Why you got an explanation, about why Lionel was using the meteorox in the experiments, and this is the big talking point of today's episode. We find out that he actually has a rare disease, an uncurable liver disease, and it's terminal. He is not gonna make it out. And it's revealed that the reason why he's been studying the meteorox and Clark Kent's potential alien DNA is because he just wants a cure. And when that gets revealed, the most inhuman person throughout the entire show thus far almost feels more human than anybody else. I was saying to Megan yesterday, if you had like all the money in the world and you knew you had like less than a year to live, don't you do whatever you can to stay alive? And it just makes you think. I'm not co-signing what he did, the bad throughout, But throughout the way, like I said, do you blame him? Like, do you now blame him for committing all of these like crimes and like being really inhumane and doing all that stuff? Because I don't know about you guys, but I now saw why he was like that. And it really just made me think, especially first time of watching, have I been judging this character unfairly? Well, the answer might be no, because before we move on to what happened to him next, out of an act of Jor-El, because I'm not going to say an act of God, but an act of Jor-El, Lionel is able to swap bodies with Clark, and in doing so just like causes a ruckus for a bit. So yeah, maybe he did deserve to be locked up, but in swapping bodies with Jor-El, or with Clark Kent, sorry, he gets a second chance as his liver disease is now cured. So Lionel, not only, like, it's just so funny, man. Not only does he get cured from the incurable liver disease, he gets released from prison on good behavior. So you literally cannot make that up. So Lionel Luthor was the menace of the early seasons of Smallville. You know, he was just dropping quotes on Lex, making threats to the Kent, and just being an absolute like dark cloud over Smallville. Some of his performances and line delivery have been some of my favorite in all of TV, from my honest opinion, especially superhero media. His character was just so good, and it was so brutal. Like, he had no prisoners, right? Not even his own son. Like his own son, I should say, still felt the wrath of Lionel Luthor. Like, that's wild to me, man. Like, I'm just speechless even thinking about it because of how cool and creative his character really was. Now, before we move on to the next bit, I did want to reiterate something if I didn't already say it. Now, Lionel Luthor is actually an original character created for Smallville. So before Smallville, he was not in any DC media, whether it was comics, video games, TV shows, movies, the whole 9 yards. So within 4 seasons, I say this as somebody who watched Smallville after it was released, or like during and then after. He was one of my favorite DC characters, like at the time, and still to this day for all time. I think if I made my top 10 favorite DC characters, Lionel Luthor is definitely in that. So he's just, yeah, definitely in the very very first few seasons, I should say, of Smallville, he to me is the guy. Like, even in the scene where we showed him get released from prison, he does end up having a duel with like fake Lex. Well, if you know, you know. And even he still beats him. So like Lionel Luthor, in like his more like, you know, I'm going to do better for the world state, takes on a pure evil version of Lex Luthor in fencing and still wins. Like, you can't mess with him, bro. Like, just so good. Now, before we now move on to the next segment, this is where the spoiler warning of the episode is going to come in. Now, everything that I've discussed thus far is pretty common knowledge for the DC fandom. But if you haven't seen past season 5 of Smallville, or specifically, if you're on season 4, episode 20 of Smallville, Alicia, sorry guys, my bad, I don't know what that was. Please click off of the episode and come back once you've finished seasons 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so that is your warning. You're now gone. So season 5 is where Lionel probably has his most villainous act in the entire show, and I would say one of the most villainous ways that we've seen this tragedy. And no, it's not the tragedy of Doth Plagueis the Wise. That's not a story that we'll tell you today, but it's the tragedy of Jonathan Kent. I don't even know what to call him, the Wise. So these guys have been jarring for years, well before season 1, keeping these guys up for a bit so I could really tell this story. It all starts when the meteor rocks came to Earth, and Clark was found by Jonathan and Martha, and they didn't know what to do. They were like, well, we want to keep him, but he has no parents. How do we adopt him? So Jonathan Kent does a deal with the devil, and he calls Lionel Luthor, and Lionel Luthor sets up his own orphanage that was in existence for like 3 months, maybe even less than that. And the one adoption they did was Clark Kent to the Kents. So these guys have been like tight and have been like, I guess, intertwined for years now, well before the show was even started. And now in season 5, Lionel has power, and what the power is no, he doesn't have super speed or he can't fly. He has information because he knows Clark's secret. And in turn, him and Jonathan come to odds. And I'll never forget being a kid, and my dad showed me the scene for the first time, was when they just go at it, and Lionel just threatens to release the secret to the world, and Jonathan physically can't handle it. And unfortunately, Jonathan Kent passes away from a heart attack, which is a reoccurring theme in the show, is Jonathan Kent having heart attacks. This one was just too much for him, and he dies. And he dies in the arms of Clark and Martha. And it was really emotional. You know, Clark always has, or let me rephrase that. Jonathan Kent always dies. He's kind of like the Uncle Ben of DC. This was probably the saddest adaptation of that for me. You know, Kevin Costner's adaptation in Man of Steel, it was stupid. I still cried, but it was dumb. This, on the other hand, was just so many emotions when I saw this for the first time. I remember I was sitting at my grandma's house. My dad came to pick us up. We were watching Smallville, and he's like, yo, has Lionel, like, not killed Jonathan yet? And I was like, yo, I don't think so, yo. And we just put it on. So, yeah, I remember watching that for the first time. It was interesting. Now, in terms of seasons 5, 6, and 7, you should definitely watch them. It's part of Smallville that I have vague memories with, so I'm not going to deep dive into it. But one thing I will never forget, because in that same sitting where my dad showed me this, he was like, wait, hold on. No, this isn't the scene I'm thinking of. And after like a 10-minute Google search, I then found out that Lionel actually meets his ultimate demise himself at the hands of his own son, as Lionel in season 7 is finally gotten rid of, and he is killed by Lex Luthor. And his death was tragic, you know. Again, maybe not the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, but it was tragic. He gets launched off of a building by his son in the most like Luthor on Luthor action you'll ever see. If he could die any death, it would be like this. And, you know, I remember watching this for the first time thinking, wow, did that really just happen? And in this scene alone, when he's falling back and reflecting, I'd like to think that the quote of, when Alexander the Great was dying, his generals asked him who he would leave his armies to, and his answer was, I leave it to the strongest. And in that moment, he was leaving the Luthor legacy to who would be the ultimate Luthor, his own son, Lex. But Lionel definitely goes out valiantly, in my opinion. You know, he's done some good, done some bad, maybe some things worse than others, but some good in between there, I will say. You know, he did do some good, especially in season 4 with Information. But yeah, this was the end for Lionel, for John Glover. And it was one of those scenes where if you were a mega stan of Clark and Lex and Lon and all those characters, you were probably clapping. You were probably like, yo, let's do this. This is awesome. He's finally gone. You probably poured yourself a drink. You probably like did something, because this was, for y'all, amazing. I was like, oh man, I can't believe he's gone. It was really sad. And the reason why I say he's gone is because Lionel Luthor just never appeared in any other DC media other than Smallville comics. So we thankfully have that as like something. This is him there. I unfortunately have not read these comic books yet, so I can't tell you the context. And in a good way, I wasn't going to read them for today's episode. This is definitely more about the show itself and the anniversary. But it was just one of those ones where I was like, when is he coming back? You know, I watched countless Superman movies, countless video games that I played. I've seen so many TV shows, Lego games. Like, where is Lionel Luthor? How is he not here? And it's one of those ones where, like, how, bro? Like, look at how good John Glover was and how menacing that character was, right? I'm going to be honest. We live in a world where we see characters get gender swapped and race swapped and, like, maybe, you know, toned down and toned up. I think I got the hair. James Gunn, if you want to do a prequel series called like The Luthors, and you want to maybe like make a decision that's going to offend some people, you could please cast me as Lionel Luthor, okay? Can't keep a brother down. I will gladly play Lionel Luthor with this hair, because, you know, early seasons he does have luscious locks like mine. His is more of a flow, mine's more curls. But all jokes aside, I really would love to see this character back, but I don't know if I need to, because this is one thing that I loved, and I discovered this yesterday, that in 2012, the official Smallville Fan Awards took place. So only a year after the show's conclusion, and Jonathan Glover won Best Actor. Like, John Glover, the man, the myth, the legend, just does it again. It's one of those ones where That alone should tell you the legacy and the impact of John Glover in Smallville as Lionel, because this is a show that's about Superman and Clark Kent and all that stuff. And we got Clark, Lex, Lana, the Kents, Pete, Chloe, Lois, all of these characters. Later on, we even get Oliver Queen. All of these characters, yet the one that the fans wanted to stand above all for the best acting performance was John Glover. And that honestly was kind of the inspiration for this episode. I saw that yesterday and I was like, you know what? I didn't even know that was true. And I said to Megan how I didn't know if I was going to do an episode, but it was the Smallville anniversary, man. I kind of had to. So I really wanted to just give this episode more of a fan approach on the legendary character of Lionel Luthor, played by John Glover, because before we close it out, it's one of those ones where you really got to sit back and think, right? Do you want to see more of something, or are you just satisfied and happy with what we have? And what we had with John Glover playing Lionel Luthor was pure perfection. I would say in terms of corporate villains, I don't think there's anyone better. Like, for a lot of people, they really enjoy Vincent D'Onofrio's adaptation of the Kingpin from Daredevil. That's like Marvel's version from a certain point of view. Eldon said the Jedi are evil, but from a certain point of view, that's kind of like my best in Marvel terms. You know, I haven't seen Luke Cage, but I'm pretty sure I think Mahershala Ali has a similar character from what I've heard. I don't know. I haven't seen the show, but I don't know if there's like necessarily a corporate menace the way Lionel Luthor was such a corporate menace in DC in Smallville. And I just think when I look back to one of my favorite arcs is when he's blind and he has glasses on and he's like styling. It's like cool to see Lionel Luthor posted up with his shades on. But yeah, I love the character, man. John Glover is amazing. He's one character, or actor I should say, that I would love to meet one day. I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of actors, but specifically I've met Tom Welling, Michael Rosenbaum, Kristen Krug. I've met Laura Vandervoot as well, and of course the lovely Erica Durance, who I have a new appreciation for, but that's for another time. I would love to add John Glover to that list, just so I could say to him, like I said to the others, thank you so much for playing such a big part in my childhood, and thank you so much for playing that character of Lionel Luthor so menacingly and so well, because without him, who's to say that I would even have continued watching Smallville? And I think that's a big testament to him, not just as an actor, but the character as well, and to the fans who voted him as the best actor, best character in the show. So yeah, overall, guys, you know, happy Smallville Day for those who celebrate. 24 years since we got, in my humble opinion, the best superhero show of all time. As someone who has seen a lot of those, not a lot for me come close. Like I said on the 23-year anniversary episode, I think The Flash could go band for band for about 3 seasons. I think you could throw an Arrow in there as well. I'll give a shout out to The Boys, but again, you're comparing, I think the exact quote is, you're comparing 32 episodes to 271. Don't quote me on that. I hope that was correct. But there's just nothing that really compares to Smallville for me when it comes to the superhero TV show genre. And I think Lionel Luthor's a big part in that. You know, when I watch a lot of the Marvel shows, I wish there was an acting performance like John Glover's Lionel Luthor in those. When I even look back at even DC shows itself, I wish that maybe there was a Lionel Luthor figure that I could say was better, was more daunting. But I don't think that's ever going to happen in my lifetime as long as John Glover has his say. And I just think that his 7 strong seasons of Smallville really stand out to me over a lot of character portrayals. So with that being said, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I had a lot of fun today just really being a fan again, talking about Smallville, one of my favorite shows of all time. And in this case, talking about the original villain, Lionel Luthor. It's so funny saying that out loud because, again, where is he, DC? James Gunn. Actually, you know what? No. Don't bring him back. If James Gunn brings back Lionel Luthor, he's going to cut and paste this version and say, oh, I wrote it in 2 minutes. So, you know what? Just leave John Glover's character on the shelf. I really wanted to just do an episode, though, just appreciating him, all jokes aside. And like I said, happy Smallville Day to those who celebrate. So, with that being said, guys, I've been Justin. It's currently raining. Last weekend it was really cold, and Halloween's coming up. I'm even in a sweater today. So, unfortunately, I don't know if I'm going outside tonight for FNF Friday. So for those who do, please stay safe and make sure, as always, you stay cold like Palma, and you just make sure you always hold on to Smallville. Thank you guys so much for watching today. This has been Screenshot, the Smallville Take Part 2, The Legacy of Lionel Luthor. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Justin, live from the Media Hub on RiotRadio.ca.